All right, Tony. Welcome back to another episode of the show.
Welcome back to you too.
Oh,
Zip.
thanks, man. Zip. Yeah. So today we're gonna be talking about things you know now, but you didn't know when you started, which for me is like everything. But anyway, what? Well, I don't know everything now, but I knew nothing when I started. Is what I'm trying to say. So why don't you kick us off with a couple of the things that you've kind of changed your mind about now that you've been doing real estate for what, 8 years, something like that?
Uh,
6?
wow. Probably 7 now.
No.
Time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah.
Not, yeah. Um, at least we're not Lenny. At least I've never had any Lenny tenant learnings. That's probably good.
Yeah.
I
Same.
re-listened to that today and just was like, don't know how this happened to this guy. But anyway, I guess the one thing that I think that no one realizes when they start out is no one really factors in what I call the headache factor with
Mm,
this. Like everyone puts stuff on their nice spreadsheet. It's easy to get information on how to analyze properties. Easy to find out all the numerical things online. But what you'll never really get from just online learning is the like day to day practical crap that comes up. And we try to talk about that a little bit on this show. But even if you listen to a bunch of other podcasts, very rarely do they talk about like literally all of the bullshit that you deal with every day, just being a DIY landlord, I guess, not like having a property manager or the stuff that your property manager is going through and that you got to pay for. There's that too. But the headache factor is like a very large thing that I didn't consider. And that's because you're plugging your stuff in your spreadsheet. The properties that always seem to cash flow the most are the ones that are usually in like the most headache inducing areas.
yeah.
So I got lucky and that I just said, well, I'm going to just buy where I live to get started. And thankfully, where I live is like a B class type neighborhood. So I didn't have to go through it that much. But eventually, we got sucked in after I kind of learned what I was doing, we got sucked into the numbers. And I bought a property that's in a more like
Headache.
C class type of neighborhood, not even D class. Like that's where it would be like highest possible on paper cash flow, but like a C class neighborhood. The amount of dumb stuff that I have had to deal with on that property that you would have to deal with either directly or indirectly if you buy a similar property is just not worth it. It's not worth it at all. Like, I mean, we have people like tag the building with graffiti every year.
Oh man.
So we have to like find a handyman that cleans off the graffiti. Like it's just that would never happen in a like my other properties because they just don't tag buildings like that. And then like we had somebody run up and kick the front glass door. So we had to replace the glass in the front door. That's never happened in a property that's like in a slightly better area. We had the FBI at the building once because one of the tenants robbed the bank. Like, and then you get people who like are always, there's people
Yeah.
that have more parties, there's more inconsiderate people, there's more just like, and
Yeah.
then who do they go to when they need to solve their problems? You would think they're adults. They should just talk to the other adults like, you know, grown-ups. But nope. They go to the landlord, they go to the property manager, and then you don't really have any power. So then eventually people leave, there's turnover. It's just a whole more involved thing. And people
Yeah.
rarely factor that whole stress aspect into their investing. And it's like the more expensive the building, typically, the nicer the area, the lower your on paper cash flow will be. But your actual time involved in having to manage that or manage the person managing it or just pay for stuff that went wrong is going to go down dramatically. So
Yeah.
that's one thing for me. What's something from you? We'll go back and forth.
I kind of get so I have like a very similar one. I call it spreadsheet magic, and it's kind of the, maybe it's the same as headache factor, but it's just like, yeah, man, you can plug all this stuff into your little spreadsheet, and you're like, oh well, this just requires 50,000 in capital improvements, and it's like, well, okay, but 50,000 in capital improvements is not 5 times 10,000 in terms of effort. It's like way more effort, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a difference between like paint and carpet and like, whatever, redoing drywall even. Like, the level of effort skyrockets. So I think particularly if like, I come from like a engineering and whatever background, so like the whole like do your spreadsheet stuff is very appealing to me, and necessary. But I think there's a like you haven't started, and in some senses this is great because you don't know what to be afraid of quite yet, but it's very easy to underestimate the operational complexity of what a deal requires to get it done, whether that's changing out tenants.
So it's
you-
hard to know what actually goes into like turning around the building.
yeah, pretty much. And I think I would much, going back in time, I would much rather take like a nice solid single, out of the gate for my first property where I can like learn a couple things, develop some relationships, spend a little money and see how it goes, then like, try and get one of these burr deals out of the gate, for example, right? Where you're signing up for like basically a major rehab that's supposed to be a home run with cash out so that you can,
Yeah. Yeah.
steamroll it all. It's like,
That goes into the low and no money down thing. Like when
yeah,
everybody, a bunch of people, when they get interested, that's what they're interested in because like you don't have any money. So you see, I can get started with low and no money down. But the truth is that like those kind of deals typically really only work out great for people who have money
yeah,
already
yeah,
because it's like there's a whole lot of risk to it. Usually there's a lot of know-how. And it's like when you're just getting started out, you don't know what you don't know, like you said, like you don't know everything that goes into this project. And if you have a whole bunch of money to burn and treat it as your university, then I guess that's a different story. But if it's like you saved up 40 grand and that's all the money that you have to
mhm,
invest, then it's like putting it into something with a lot of risk to get started is probably just setting yourself up for maybe not failure, but a lot of financial stress.
yep,
So
yeah.
that's good. That's a good one. I like that one.
All right, thanks, man. How
Yeah.
about you? What's We'll do like six of these. What you got next?
Total, not each.
Yeah, yeah, three total, or three each.
um, I think that I think about like how much I learned about how people can, this sounds really negative, but how people can let you down. Like I think that whenever you get into this, you're typically people who start investing in real estate are very, they're motivated. They're, they're like people that actually start and do it, not just
Yeah, they're
people that are
go-getter types.
interested. Like,
Yeah,
yeah, they're usually harder workers. They're people who are going to go after the goal persistently, that sort of thing. Um, but a lot of your service providers and your tenants like aren't the same,
yeah,
like hardworking, reliable
yeah,
folks. So I think that at the beginning, like especially because your social group, like you're usually going to hang out with people that are like you, so you're going to be used to people that you know have a similar mindset because typically what do they say, you're the average of the 5 to 10 people you hang out with most, so you're normally going to be around mostly similar people. But then now that you get thrown into the GP, the general public, it's like now it's all different. I mean, you're going to get lied to if you do so many times, so many different ways. Like I I've been lied to so many times now about just dumb stuff. Like I legitimately got the excuse from a contractor recently where they said my car ran out of gas. And I'm like, dude, I'm like in my 30s and I've literally never just like run a car out of, I mean, maybe it can happen, sure, but like I highly doubt that you just ran your car out of gas. Like, can we make up a better excuse here? Or just like you get so many bogus things that just come up.
oh man,
And contractors, tenants, the thing that you have to remind yourself of is that really this isn't intended to scare you. Like I would say when it comes to tenants, 98% of them are totally fine people. It's just the 2% of them that like take up all your time and drive you insane. Contractors, probably 20% of them are cool.
all
So
right,
I guess that's one thing is that, you just learn more about what people are like.
Yeah.
People
Yeah.
suck.
I have another one. I have another one that's like kind of similar, to follow on to piggyback on what you got. For us, it's like kind of unexpected wants and wishes from tenants. So, like, uh, you know, they call, for example, in one of our buildings, the lights burned out. That really old light fixtures, we had installed LEDs, and basically there was too much energy and it like burned out the fixture itself. Uh, so that sucks. So we replaced the fixtures, no big deal. But the tenant wanted, uh, we installed these like LED ones that have built-in LED strips in them. And then the tenant was like, "Oh, I want to put in my smart bulbs and like stuff like that." And it was like, "Okay, well, I just installed both of these. Like, couldn't we have had this conversation before?" Like, so just it's kind of this interesting dynamic of you want to talk to the tenant about what you're going to do so that you can solicit some, I think, immediate feedback if they're going to be very upset about it, but you also don't want to be like, "Hey, what kind of lights do you want?" Right? Like, it's not a shopping trip with my credit card. So kind
Sometimes I
of
think it is.
so uh maybe to make this humorous, there's a show called Daniel Tiger, which is like Mr. Roberts, and basically all the stuff that they do in Daniel Tiger to teach toddlers stuff is what we do with our tenants now. So like one of the things is like, when we do something new, first we talk about what we'll do. So
Yeah.
that's what we do for our tenants now. We explain what's about to happen, and kind of like, "Hey, we already bought this. This is about to go in. If and like try and give them the product before it goes in, so that if they have a major, you know, one, it communicates like, "Hey, we understand the issue and we're making progress on it. Right? Here's visible evidence of progress."
Yeah.
And then the second thing is like, let me know before I install two light fixtures in your house, please, because I don't want to be at your house.
Yeah.
so, so yeah,
That's definitely true. I mean, if you give in to most of their like everything that they want, you're just gonna be doing upgrades, not repairs. And that's, something to keep in mind, like what's an upgrade versus what's a repair.
yeah,
And it is like if you have a good tenant, you want to keep them. Usually every year, sometimes you can offer like an improvement to the property,
yeah.
up to a certain amount of money, and that like helps keep them happy, which is good. So, but yeah, definitely just like giving into every whimsy is kind of, I don't know, not the way to go.
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna get manhandled. It's just like you
Yeah.
get fatigued, man. You get fatigued, to your
Yeah.
point about headache factor. So
And that brings up kind of two things. One, real fast, inherited tenants just suck.
yeah,
Like, you mentioned training people like the toddler show, like inherited tenants just are never trained correctly. I can think of, I don't know, if I had to like go through my whole portfolio and think about how many inherited tenants we actually kept and how many we would have liked to have kept, it's probably like 40% or
yeah,
less.
less than half. Yeah.
Yeah, most of them just suck for one reason or another. They're either, because the thing is, when people are selling buildings, they'll put anybody in there just because new investors think like, oh, it's already performing, this is great. And then it's like they didn't screen them.
yeah.
So,
Or they're selling because it's
or
easier than evicting
what
them.
do we say about the Lenny thing? Like, it makes $2,000 on paper.
Yeah.
It's like, but not in real life.
yeah.
um so yeah, there's that. And then also, I'm supposed to only have three, but now I'm giving you a bonus.
I like it.
I think at the beginning we touched on it briefly, but everybody kind of focuses on like cash flow.
Yeah.
But I think the more that I got into this, the more I realized that like cash flow is important. You need to not be buying buildings that lose money every month. Market, you know, like some markets are different, but the bulk of the markets, you want it to be able to cash flow or at least come close to break even. Um, but that's like way down on the list of what's actually getting you ahead. I mean, the longer you do this, once you do like a balance sheet for a bank or something like that, you're going to look at how much equity you've gained in the property, even not just based on appreciation, but even in just the principal paid out and the tenant's done for you. And that's what's creating your wealth. Now, granted, it's trapped in the property. I mean, it's equity. It's not, you can't eat equity.
Right.
Um, but you can tap into that eventually with refinances or lines of credit or whatever. So it is important. That's what's really driving your wealth. And then additionally, they talk about tax benefits, but I mean, if you do it right, you can pay and you make this amount of money and you're in this
What
tax
taxes?
bracket. Well,
I'm kidding.
some people, not
Yeah.
sponsored by this show. Some people get their rent in cash and they're like, one for Uncle Sam, one for me,
Yeah.
one for me, one
Yeah.
for Uncle Sam, two for me. Um, but if you do it right and you file, legally everything that you're supposed to, um, I got somebody once, they asked me a week ago, they were like, so you like don't, I mean, you've never not reported like your cash rent. I'm like, correct. I have never lied on my taxes. They're like, so you're so again, they're like, so you're telling me that you've never once messed up your taxes. And I'm like, not
Not on,
intentionally.
not
I
on
mean,
purpose. Yeah.
I'm sure
Yeah.
I did something wrong, but
Yeah.
like not intentionally.
Yeah.
I think the only thing that I will admit to, even on the show, because whatever, I don't care, is it like when you have a bunch of properties, certain utility bills don't actually like, if you go online, like we have a sewage company called Jordan Tax in Pittsburgh, and
You
you
do.
can't just look up your property address and see how much you paid in sewage. And the online like amount just gives you a confirmation code. So you can't even like tie it back to an account. So I typically just assign those to
Ballpark it.
whichever property.
Yeah.
I'm like, you know what? It all evens out because it's like
Yeah.
all expenses. Um, but anyway, but yeah, the guy was like shocked that I don't lie on my taxes. And I'm like, well,
Yeah.
sorry. But what my point was that if you do everything legally, you might be up here in this tax bracket, but through all your deductions, mostly the depreciation expense, you'll probably end up paying on your income like you're in this tax bracket below.
Hmm.
Just because there's so many more write-offs, like legitimate write-offs. I mean, like if you ever find a conference in a cool place to go to, like a real estate conference or something like that, you can pay for it and then you can write off your trip there. Like, I mean, this isn't tax advice, it's just common knowledge to check with your accountant for anything you write off. But like if you're, if you plan your life around knowing some of these things, you can really save a lot of money. I mean, like if you lease your car and you use it mostly for business, you can write off your car lease payment, your mileage, you can write off all these different things. So, you know, there is a lot of savings just out of real estate specifically, but then also just owning a business is like sort of a tax benefit, although you pay self-employment tax, which is a really cool thing from the government. Thanks, guys. Um, so yeah, that's the big lesson is number one, inherited tenants suck, and number two, like don't get too tied up on cash flow that it's the only thing you focus on. Try to look at the overall picture, including the eventual sale of the property or the refinance, one or the other, because you're probably not just gonna like, I mean, some people pay them off, no debt, and it's like that's great for some people, like if that meets your goals, fine. But most investors that I know, you're either going to sell it or you're going to refinance it to tap into that equity. So
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, I think that 5 is enough. I think, you know,
well,
that was on my
6,
list
you
too.
cheated. You cheated. You
Well,
got
so
out of one.
no, on my list I have year 2 payoffs and appreciation is also there. Very similar. It's like, I was so focused on the year 1 numbers. And then even for us, look, we have 3 properties, 6 doors. I mean, appreciation heavily outweighs the cash flow. I think you
Yeah.
need cash flow. It stops you from being poor, but you get wealthy on appreciation.
Mhm.
And that, I mean, that is,
Internal rate of return is like the number that's very useful, I think.
Yeah,
because a lot of times people want to look at cash on cash, and it's like that doesn't really, most of the time that period that they're analyzing is just the first year, and it's like that
exactly.
if you're only analyzing the first year, you're never gonna
Yes.
hit the
So learn
numbers you
about
want.
the XIRR function in Excel, everybody. Do it.
Or just plug it into the bigger pockets calculator
Or do that.
and it gives it to you.
All right. Well, there you go. Even better advice. All right. Well, let's wrap. Well, let's get these nice and snappy. So, Tony, where can they find more about you?
At 412 Agent. Follow me on the social medias, Tony and Gotti, or Anthony and Gotti on YouTube if they want to look up the video. But if you follow me on Facebook or Instagram or whatever, I post the links to the videos now. So
Perfect.
there's that. And then if they want to call in to talk
412
to us and leave us a question, 212
83.
66
All right.
412 212 8366. That's the
Yeah.
number. Call and
Perfect.
leave your name. Let us make up where you're from, and then tell us a question.
Yeah. Perfect. And if you enjoyed this episode, give us a favor. You like it, subscribe. Thanks so much.
Peace.